US, Japan, India, and Australia agreed to cooperate on critical minerals, all as part of efforts to counter China. Let's first start with this Quad story. We actually have Gordon Flake, CEO of Perth USAsia Center from the University of Western Australia, joining us live. So, Gordon, let me first ask you, what is the significance of the new Quad Critical Minerals Initiative, and how quickly can it reduce dependence on China for rare earth processing supply?
Well, the short answer is that it's very significant given the relative size and economic heft of the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. Australia is important because we actually are the source for many of the core minerals there and have a lot of the expertise involved with that. In fact, today there's only one commercial scale rare earth processing facility on the planet on land outside of China, and that's a West Australian company, Lynas, and a mine here that does this processing in Malaysia. So we're already a lot of the way there. When you combine the investment capability, the demand, and the might that you have in the US, India, and the United States, I think we're going a long way there. As to how quickly we can do that remains to be seen. It's difficult to do so on a market basis because China has largely cornered the market. And so if governments are willing to invest in this, it'll happen. If we're counting on corporations to do it on a profit margin only basis, it's a much more difficult proposition.
And the Quad has numerously expressed its initiative to reduce dependence on China, and it also expressed concern over Beijing's growing provocative actions in the South China Sea. So how unified and effective is the Quad grouping likely to be in deterring China's growing assertiveness in these disputed waterways?
Well, look, on the one hand, it's good that the foreign ministers met. They met on Secretary Rubio's first day in the office. The fact that they're meeting again relatively soon after that gives you an indication that the partnership continues. But you've kind of put your finger on the point of one of the issues there is that they all have slightly different interests. And so while the foreign ministers meeting condemned terrorism, they didn't specifically mention, Pakistan. While they condemned the North Korean nuclear program, they didn't highlight the immediate linkage to what just happened in Iran. And while they laid out a critical minerals program, they didn't specifically name China. When it comes to the South China Seas, they reiterated their longstanding commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. They continued longstanding statements about not having any one country change the status quo by force. And they called for peace in the South China Seas without specifically calling out China. So this is four very important countries looking to cooperate together without necessarily going over to the more sensitive issues for individual members of the Quad.
And speaking of individual members and their respective demands, India's stance on terror was reflected in the Quad statement, but it wasn't in the China-led Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So does this signal hardening positions between the U.S. and China-led blocs on India-Pakistan issues? And what does this mean for India?
Well, look, India has long made a point of not choosing and pursuing its own interests. So India does have interests in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but that's probably not the format for them to be, condemning Pakistan, given the leadership role that China plays on that and China's support for Pakistan. Ironically, the United States also supports Pakistan, but has been quite unequivocal in condemning the terrorist attack that took place in recent months. And so in this case, I don't know that you can say one is the winner, one is the loser, one is stronger, one is the other. They both have different purposes and different groupings, and I think you're going to see India continue to pursue both avenues.
Another geopolitical flashpoint worth noting is the war over in Ukraine. And given North Korea's continued missile launches, cyber attacks, what new strategies or tools could Quad deploy to addressing these escalating threats, especially since Pyongyang and Moscow have been deliberately and actively showing strengthened military ties?
Yeah, so this is an area where it's significant that India joined with Japan, the United States, and Japan in expressing concern about North Korea's nuclear program, because India, in this case, is a little bit more ambivalent given their longstanding relationship with Iran and given their longstanding relationship with Russia. So that condemnation is significant, but it didn't take that next step to say, obviously, there should be consequences for North Korea supporting Russia in Iran because India is a bit conflicted. So the Quad really is about the art of the possible. It's how these four countries can work together without necessarily crossing red lines or areas of insecurity or uncomfortableness, if you will, on the other parties in the Quad.
All right. Thank you so much for those answers. That was Gordon Flake, CEO of Perth USAsia Center from the University of Western Australia.